Good morning, good day, and welcome to everyone joining us for another exciting podcast of Comply or Die. I'm your familiar and local host, Kyle. Today we've got Greg Kotze with us. Greg comes from quite a unique background, finds himself in sales now, but originally has a master's degree in biochemistry. And if you might be wondering, how does this all tie together? Well, to be honest, we're wondering ourselves. So Greg, take us through it. How did it all come about and how do you find yourself in sales?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, definitely a loaded one. So to take it back, I guess, like 10 or so years growing up, I was always a very analytical person, very interested in the world's problems and how I could solve them. Cancer always seemed like a really big problem, and this is something where I found a passion in. I pursued a degree that ended up in a master's degree in biochemistry, focusing on cancer research, spending a lot of time around in the lab and looking at microscopes. And while I was doing that, I also noticed a bit of a sort of more entrepreneurial spirit or interest in sales and business developments. And that, with a combination of realizing that cancer was a bit harder to cure than I thought it would be, sent me to the big city here in Joburg to understand some opportunities on the side. Scytale very quickly reached out, and it looked like a very interesting company. It looked like they were doing some really exciting stuff. And something I couldn't say no to. And been here for the last year or so, and I guess the rest is history.
And talk us through that journey at Scytale. I mean, there were a lot of changes in your life. Like you said, you came from a small city, moved up to Joburg, for anyone listening and not aware, the big sort of hub in South Africa where business and everything sort of happens around here. Started your journey as an SDR, moved into now your current role as an account exec. That journey and progression into a more senior sales role, how did you find that?
Definitely challenging, I think, if I had to sum it up into one word, but equally as exciting. So yeah, got into the role at Scytale as an SDR, sales development representative. For those who don't know, basically that role is to get into markets, really get into the trenches, pick up the phone, do cold calling, and try and have a look at companies in the market that could be potentially looking for a solution like Scytale, and bring them in to have a quick look at us. And it's a very exciting, fast-paced role. I learned a lot about compliance and of course the markets around this in the tech space. About 8 months into the role, an account executive position opened up, basically now being responsible for meeting these prospective clients, understanding their pains, their problems, what they're really looking for, and seeing if we're in a position to help them out, and driving them towards working for us, of course. And yeah, it's been definitely a big up and down road. Working at a startup, there's always a lot of changes. There's a lot of things kind of up and down all the time. You don't always know exactly what's happening, but I think that's the fun part of it as well. You're able to come in and you can make an impact, and really move fast in the right places.
I think I must say at this point as well, it's always great to have someone that's in a sales role actually on the podcast, because I think I could probably say one or two words, and just because you're used to it from different demos, you're able to fill a very blank sentence with the whole conversation. So I appreciate having you around for that. And to talk, let's get the listeners on the compliance process and the sales process. So we'll tackle a few different aspects of that. Maybe the first one is, take us through what that demo looks like on your side.
Yeah, of course. So, when we first meet a potential tech company that got some sort of need for compliance, whether it's from a commercial side or a legal side, the first thing that we need to do often is to actually educate. Compliance it's not something that's on top of mind for anyone every day. They don't wake up and say, I want to think about compliance today or understand this. It's something that all of a sudden comes up as part of your product development, or you're going to markets, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you need to get this framework. What is it? What does it actually look like? And so the first step in really engaging with our potential customers is helping them understand what they're actually needing. Do they even need it? Why do they need it? And after that, providing the sort of right education on what that process would look like, looking at different ways you can actually take this on, the various solutions around that, and helping them understand if Scytale is the right way. So yeah, after a bit of education, we're always going to go ahead and introduce sort of Scytale and our general overview of how we're taking things on. For those who don't know, we've got quite a unique position in the market to handle compliance. There's a lot of technology-led solutions out there. There's a lot of consulting solutions out there. And what we've done is taken a very hybrid approach between these solutions, where we've got a tech-enabled but consultant-led solution, which we're finding is really the best way to take this on. We're typically then going to go through or highlight what that service is going to look like over the period of getting compliance, dive straight into our technology, show them how that's going to work, what it's going to look like, and then always, of course, a brief understanding on the commercials around a project like this.
I feel like you've answered so much in that already. And this obviously is the process that you typically go about. Let's talk about the challenges that you sometimes face or the pain points with it. Are there recurring themes that you have where you 50% of the time have customers that ask the same questions or they have the same concerns? What are those traits that you see?
I think, especially in the startup space in this tech market, there's two primary concerns or lack of knowledge that we're seeing within the space. The first is where the startups are not really in a position to understand when they should actually go forward with a compliance certification. Often they might think it's a bit too early, they haven't launched yet, they're still MVP, it wouldn't make sense. Other times they think it's simply not the right time because they're focusing on products or going to market. So helping them understand sort of the right time and when it is to tackle this. And I guess the old proverb here really comes into play where they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the best next time is today. And this truly applies with compliance. What we see is, from a few perspectives, it's always going to be better to get this done sooner than later. Why is this? A couple of reasons. The first is from, the development of your organization, your infrastructure. It's something that you want to get in place earlier rather than later, so that you have to avoid doing all this unpacking at a later stage. The other perspective of looking at getting this done earlier is from a commercial perspective. Compliance is, while it's very much rooted in security, we often find that it's a commercial issue rather than an actual security issue. So you might be entering a new market or a new region, or you've got a specific client that says, hey, we want to see an ISO certificate to get this done. And the problem is, if you are leaving it up until that point, this isn't an overnight process, and you'll often find yourselves losing out on that deal or that potential business engagement. So there's kind of that twofold reason to tackle it in. And that's always something we're looking to help our perspective by customers understand. The second thing that we do see a lot of the time is misconceptions about what this process looks like. And that ties a bit back to what I mentioned a bit earlier, where, compliance isn't something that you're thinking of actively. It's not a core process of business operations like marketing, sales, or your product. And so there often isn't a real idea on what this really looks like. So helping our prospective customers understand, how long does this really take? What is the effort going to be involved? What are the true costs? And what I find all the time is that there's always a misconception about one of these three factors that often then ends up leading them to do this sooner than they had planned because they thought it would be way more expensive, be way more efforts, or take a lot more time as well. So yeah, I think those are the two things that we see, especially in the startup space, around compliance.
And it's also, from my side, really interesting always to see the perspective. You obviously, from a sales side, are working with customers that more often than not want to tackle compliance for sales reasons, and then to really be able to transition that from, okay, we've now got a customer on board and they've closed and they've done their first SOC or ISO project, whatever the case may be, and now helping to deliver the value after the fact. So I think that's progression of it, where I completely agree with you. 9 times out of 10, a company doesn't come in and I'm sure you have the same, where they engage and say, hey, Greg, I love SOC 2. I really want to do compliance. It's a business enablement at the end of the day. And that's, again, like you say, sort of catch them in and get that process going, and then can deliver that value after the fact. Talk us through, we've discussed a bit about the process, and we've spoken about your progression from SDR to AE. What does a day in the life of Greg look like? Let's have a little bit of a personal topic.
Yeah, so personal topic, I think would be a very short conversation. The job is quite consuming at the moment. At the moment, currently working within Australian markets as well as European, as United States. So typical day starts about 5:30 a.m. Where we start meeting companies from the Australian markets. I've then got about 30 minutes to rush and get ready to work, come in, always make sure I've got some time for a quick coffee or a ping pong game at our offices here before it's straight to the desk, where I'm looking at 10 or so meetings throughout the day, in between them in engagements with prospects, helping them understand certain commercial elements or solution elements. And then, always good to end the day off with a couple of calls from other markets like the United States, which I'm enjoying as well.
And on those different regions that you now just described, someone listening, again, I like to bring up these topics or recurring themes and trends. right now, are there any specific themes that you've seen that maybe Australia is targeting something? And I've often seen it from a compliance side, and it doesn't really make sense what drives the need for so many companies to be wanting to do SOC or ISO suddenly. Anything like that happening at the moment in any of the regions?
Yes, so over the last 6 months, I wouldn't say I've noticed extreme changes in the market around compliance. The one thing I have noticed is, especially in the Australian market, we're seeing a general large increase in the requests for these certifications within that market. And I think it's a great testament as well to how the Australian tech market has been absolutely booming with a lot more global relevance, which is amazing. The tech market in Australia is really fantastic. What we see as well around, I guess, these different regions and what really highlights the commercial elements of compliance is they're often very regional specific. So just to give you an example, you might have heard the framework SOC 2, and this is something from a US perspective we're seeing all the time. If you are a company in Europe or Africa or Australia and you want to go ahead and tackle the US market, you got to get SOC 2 compliance. This is something that's almost asked before they ask about the pricing of your solution. It's what they want to know. And it's something that we're just seeing more and more. And I guess, as the world is becoming more and more digitized and everything is becoming cloud-based and online, we're seeing that scrutiny for security just increasing in relevance as well. And what's really exciting as well is these compliance frameworks are popping up based on more specific industries. Just as an example, of course, AI has been the buzzword for 2023, 2024, and probably the next 5 years. And we're now seeing frameworks coming up for the compliance around AI systems. There's a lot of personal data or business sensitive data that's being processed, how that's being handled. And so we're definitely seeing a lot more scrutiny and awareness around that industry specific, which is important.
Absolutely. And when you are engaging with a customer on a demo, or you sort of at that phase of closing deal, it's something that always interests me personally. A customer that comes to you and needs SOC 2, is it normally just dictated because they're in a region and have an understanding they need it? Is it more, I suppose to simplify the question, is it region dependent that someone will say, we're in Europe, so we need SOC, or we're in Europe, so we want ISO over SOC in America, something like that? Or is it more a case of them really streamlining it to, we've got a big deal that's going to close and they want us to have SOC 2, and if we don't have it, we can't work with them?
Yeah. So we do see the first case sometimes where, we've got a European company and they're understanding that ISO might be important, and they'll come to us and say, look, we need to get it. But in those cases, as much as I love selling, we want to help people and make sure that we're doing the right things and guiding them in the right way. So the first thing is to always really understand what's driving towards this. Have they met with potential customers? Have they got insights that they will be needing this specifically in the market they're working on? So we do want to make sure that this is actually the right move for them to go through this framework, and that it is going to make sense from a business side as well. So while we do get that, we always want to clarify that it does actually make sense to take in that direction. Other cases, we sometimes meet people who have got like a huge enterprise deal on the cards, and that enterprise has said to them like, hey, if you don't have SOC 2 in the next 3 months, there's not going to be any possibility of a deal there. So in those cases, it's not direct and revealing that getting this framework is going to help enable them. So we'll always go directly through supporting that.
And my final question to you, what is that 1 or 5 or 10, however many there are, factors that make closing a deal in this market really challenging? Is it someone just not sure about, like you mentioned earlier, what the process looks like, around them connecting with data, the value they get out of it? What is it? Is there one specific thing?
There's definitely a few, but I think the biggest one is that, especially for startups doing this for the first time, they don't always understand the actual pain and the challenges that compliance can present. So you can present a very well-rounded automated solution that's enabled by advisory, but they don't even know that they need that. Why do they need these certain tools of technology? And that's why education here is so important. While this is a sales role, we find that we are consulting a lot of the time more than actually just directly selling, to help our prospects understand what the process is going to look like, so that they can then make an educated decision on if this tool is going to be relevant and if the solution is right for them.
Look, from my side, I'm happy to wrap this one up there today. To everyone that's listening and has joined us today, when you get to the point, I want to say, that you are meeting Greg or one of the other ADs, you're probably at a point where you may as well just sign. I mean, if he hasn't convinced and sold you today on the call, I don't know what more can. Greg, thank you for taking the time today to be with us. It's always really insightful to see someone with a master's in biochemistry now having their take on software compliance solutions. Thank you for joining us today, and good luck with closing all the deals.
Good stuff. Thank you, everyone. And feel free to pop me a DM if you need compliance.